Good day, everyone. Welcome to the last session of APAC DNS Forum 2022 for today. Before we begin this session, once again, I would like to highlight that you can win prizes by attending the forum sessions. So here, how it goes. We need you to attend all the forum sessions, engage with the speaker through Q&A, and visit your booth to collect the points. The top 10 participants who collect the most points will receive an Amazon gift card worth USD 50 each. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is entitled Establishing a Trusted Notifier Mechanism to Fight DNS Abuse. TLD and gTLD registry TWNIC and DotAsia recently joined forces to co-develop a trusted notifier anti-phishing fast-track mechanism. This session aims to explore how the wider APAC community could collaborate with one another to further this effort. With our today is the moderator for this session will be Pavel Farhan. Let us welcome Pavel. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last session of today. I would like to thank Amir, thank you very much for the introduction. And yeah, I know it has been probably a very long day for everyone, but it's still the first day at the APAC DNS Forum. So hold your horses because it's going to be a lot better in the next few days. Ladies and gentlemen, for you today, we have an amazing session because to me as well, it just came as something that everyone should be aiming for, a session that is insightful and a session that I think matters with the topics and relevance that we have for this forum. So, of course, as the title states, today's session right now, it's about establishing a trusted notifier mechanism to fight DNS abuse. And I'm not going to get too much into the introduction, as you may have read already, but to just echo the words of Jerome Lowe from last week, where he talked about due to the higher requirements of the public on network security, ICANN right now is paying more and more attention to the issue of DNS abuse. And we have been very fortunate that TWNIC and DotAsia have established a trusted partner notification mechanism to reduce the spread of network hacking, to help reduce DNS abuse incidents, and strengthen the security of the network ecosystem. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have an amazing panel for you today with some incredible, with an incredible cohort of speakers, and I would like to introduce them one by one. So, first we have Brian Symbolic, who is the General Counsel for the Public Internet Registry, which is a nonprofit registry operator for .org, and he oversees its legal affairs and anti-abuse program. Brian is also a coordinator of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network's Domain and Jurisdiction Program, and was one of the co-creators of the framework that addresses abuse and one of its primary authors. Brian also serves as a co-chair of the registry stakeholder group, DNS Abuse Working Group. The second speaker we have for today is Dr. Kenny Huang, who is the CEO of TWNIC. But of course, if you have been around in the internet community in the Asia Pacific, you have definitely seen this man, because since the early years of Taiwan's internet development, he has contributed a great deal to build up a better internet environment in Taiwan. And because of his tremendous knowledge and experience, he has been invited to take up leading roles in many internet technology and policy organizations, some of them namely being APAC, of which he served as the executive council member and also as a policy SIG chair. He has also served as an NRO council member and PIR board member, a TWNIC board member, along with many other very established positions. Currently, Dr. Kenny Huang is in charge of a working group for the country code name supporting organization and for policy for the deselection of internationalized domain names, commonly termed as CCPD P4. He's also co-chair of the Chinese Generation Panel and has been working with ICANN in a varied assessment of roles. Our third speaker, the last but not least, we have Edmund Chung. He is the CEO of DotAsia, A social innovator and an entrepreneur. He currently serves as the CEO of DotAsia and also on the board of ICANN. He's also an executive committee of the Internet Society in Hong Kong and the board of Make a Difference. Edmund has served in capacity in a lot of other patents, particularly in internationalized domain names and email addresses technologies, and has served on many global ID and related technical and policy groups. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we have our first speaker for the day, Brian Symbolic, to give us an overview on the session. Brian, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Pavel, and thank you very much for having me. Let me just briefly share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my presentation? Okay.
Yes, we can, Brian.
Okay, great, thank you. Seeing some head nods. Hi, everyone. I am Brian Symbolic from Public Interest Registry. I'm here to briefly give an overview on some work that's been done recently on trusted notifiers. And in the interest of time, I'll skip over information on our company, which I will post in the chat after the fact. So there's been lots of information in recent years coming out about trusted notifier relationships and the topic of today's conversation, and it's sort of been an ever-evolving conversation. But there's three key pieces of work I wanted to touch on and then briefly highlight some work that PIR has done in this space as well. First is the framework to address abuse that Pavel previously touched on. Second is the contracted parties house trusted notifier framework. And third is the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network recently put out a trusted notifier typology and framework components document. So first, the framework to address abuse is a document that was published in October 2019 with initially 11 signatories, and now there's more than 50 participating registries and registrars. It includes both gTLDs, generic TLDs like .org, as well as several country code top-level domains. And really, the framework has two parts. One, it states that registries and registrars must take action on technical or DNS abuses like phishing, pharming, malware, botnets. But it also has a component for website content abuses that the scale of harm is so egregious that it may be appropriate for a registry or a registrar to take action. And these are things like child sexual abuse materials and CSAM. But it recognizes that registries and registrars aren't experts in particular these forms of website content abuses. So it points to the use of trusted notifiers and states that while it's ultimately the responsibility of registries and registrars to take action on forms of abuse, trusted notifiers can be a crucial resource to enhance abuse monitoring for registries and registrars, particularly when it comes to those forms of egregious content abuses. Second, the contracted parties house, for those of you that aren't deeply rooted in ICANN structures, the contracted party house is made up of the gTLDs, the generic TLD registries, as well as the registrar stakeholder group. And they have a joint DNS abuse working group. I'm co-chair of the registry side abuse working group. And last year we put out a CPH, contracted party house, trusted notifier framework. And that document defines a trusted notifier as an entity that enters into a written agreement with a registry or registrar that outlines the roles and responsibilities between the notifier and the registry and registrar. It's kind of important to note upfront what this document is and is not. It sets forth the sort of principles of what a trusted notifier is, which I'll touch on in the next slide, but it is not a program. It is not a clearinghouse. If you're interested in becoming a trusted notifier, you can't sign up through this document. It really just lays the groundwork for what you should expect if you are a registry or registrar working with a trusted notifier, or if you're a trusted notifier working with a registry or registrar. An important principle with this document is that not all notifiers are trusted notifiers. And all of the documents I'll touch on really, that's a key principle, is that it's only through the relationship and the trust that is built and acknowledged from the registry or the registrar to that expert notifier. So what is a trusted notifier? It has to have strong demonstrated expertise in the subject matter. It operates with a consistent adherence to a high level of substantive and procedural due diligence, meaning before it refers something to a registry or registrar, it has really ensured that that is either DNS abuse or website content abuse. It stands behind its reporting, and that can look like many things, to include things like indemnity in the event that the information provided was incorrect. And finally, there's an appeal process for a registrant that has its domain acted upon under this framework. Ultimately, the registry or the registrar has to be the one that still makes the determination to suspend a domain name or not. And this framework encourages transparency reporting to sort of get at criticism that this is somehow some sort of shadow regulation. The clearer that you can be and the more transparent a registry or registrar can be in its trusted notifiers, the better served it will be, in my opinion. The last document I want to touch on is the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network work on on trusted notifiers. I'm proud to serve as the coordinator for the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network domains track. And this document puts forth a typology of trusted notifiers, identifying different types of trusted notifiers. It sets forth the attributes of a trusted notifier, but ultimately this quote that's in the little blue bubble, I think, distills a trusted notifier relationship well. And it says that trust is not a commodity which can be compelled. Each operator makes its own decisions as to whether and with whom it will enter a trusted notifier relationship. The Internet and Jurisdiction, or INJ, as I'll refer to them here, they have an interesting approach that it's not just the contractual relationship with an expert notifier that the CPH document or the framework to address abuse looks at. So they have two types of trusted notifiers, and I'm actually going to speak to the second one first. And this is a slide. This is a table that comes right out of the INJ framework. So the second type of trusted notifier for them is the one that we've described. So you have an expert organization or entity that forms a relationship and enters into a written agreement with the registry and registrar with their roles and responsibilities outlined. There's also, according to INJ, a sort of de facto trusted notifier relationship with a registry and registrar and law enforcement with prosecutorial authority, which is a legalese way of saying your local law enforcement or your national law enforcement with jurisdiction over the registry or registrar. And so what this looks like in practicality would be like, as PIR, we're based in the United States. If, for example, the FBI came to us and told us that there was a botnet that was going to be propagating soon, working with the FBI collaboratively without potentially requiring a court order for something like a botnet that falls squarely within our DNS abuse policy, that relationship really is sort of a de facto trusted notifier relationship when it comes to flagging DNS abuse. Finally, I just wanted to sort of show what these relationships look like in action. So at PIR, we have several trusted notifier relationships in place, sort of the two most high profile, one along the same lines of the INJ law enforcement with prosecutorial authority. We have a relationship with the United States Food and Drug Administration, where they provide notice to us of domains that have websites that appear to be dedicated to distribution of opioids or narcotics online. And this is sort of a two-way street. If they identify them, they send them to us. Likewise, we get referrals about that, and we send it to the FDA, and they verify, yes, it appears that these domains are selling opioids online. The second one I want to highlight is our work with the Internet Watch Foundation, which is a UK-based watchdog for child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. And this is a relationship we're very proud of, and one that I think shows how well these relationships can work. So in the 5 years before we started working with the Internet Watch Foundation, we had a total of 4 domains sent to us for child sexual abuse material. And we sort of had a feeling that it's not that that material didn't exist. It's not that it wasn't out there. It's that we didn't know how to look for it. And more to the point, it's very problematic. It's illegal to access that content. So we were sort of, our hands were tied. We didn't know how to find it. Even if we did, we didn't know what to do with it. So working with an expert organization like Internet Watch Foundation has enabled us to, in the last 5 years, since we've been working with them, they've identified more than 4,400 images of child sexual abuse material that then we route and process and provide notice to the registrant and the registrar to ultimately get that content removed under threat of suspension of the domain name. So it shows that when you leverage an expert organization's expertise for something that falls within your policy, the relationship can work very well. And that was it for me. So I want to make sure to save time for all the other esteemed panelists. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to questions after the fact.
Thank you so much, Brian. And we do have a Q&A session towards the last 20 minutes. So if you have any questions, please just put them in the Q&A, and we will definitely address them later. Brian, thank you so much for your presentation and honestly for giving us such a great insight into what exactly a trusted notifier mechanism is, because I believe a lot of our audience here do not have an idea. I definitely didn't have an idea as well. So I got to understand a lot more. And as you mentioned, yeah, in the past, when illicit activities related to domain names occurred, registrars chose to cooperate with judicial authorities in the hope that taking legal action would remove the site. It's just that the process for the judicial authorities to confirm whether it is illegal is very lengthy, takes way too much time. And if a domain name registration is in another country, we have to go through a lot of red tapes, and it's very difficult to enforce the law. But thankfully, we have had an initiation at TWNIC and DotAsia are now cooperating through the exchange of information and mutual authentication to take a step in dealing with this problem. And to tell you more about TWNIC's thinking behind this, the man himself, Dr. Kenny Wong. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Let me share my slide first. Okay. First of all, thank you, Brian, for introducing the Trust Notifier framework, and also try to introduce the common practice development, the effort between the DNS abuse, how to handle the DNS abuse. And I'm happy to be here to share some of experience between TWNIC and DotAsia to see how we collaborate together against DNS abuse. So basically, we need to consider what kind of internet has been regulated. How can we handle internet properly? And as Brian mentioned, actually, we have existing law and law enforcement agent, they probably can handle the cybercrime for us. And in addition to the law regime, we still need to consider there are many different kind of characteristics between internet governance entity. I just list some of them, such as ICANN, such as APAC or TWNIC or IETF. And we have some common similar characteristics. For example, like we are multi-stakeholder initiative, and also we are bottom-up model of governance, and we can set a standard, and once the standard has been defined, you can using the standard to regulate the cyber behavior like you expect. And also we operate based on contractual compliance. So for example, like a TWNIC, we are .tw registry, and .asia is .asia registry, and we can enforce some of the term and condition within the registry agreement or registrar agreement to enforce some sort of appropriate behavior between a registrant or registry, or some of the obligation they need to fulfill the contractual requirement. Okay, so moving to the next slide, I just simply introduce how can we regulate cyberspace. And probably Brian already mentioned some of it, and I recap the theory that was defined 20 years ago by Lauren Lessig, a law professor from Chicago University, and we call that the New Chicago School theory. And basically, the cyberspace can be regulated by 4 driving forces. the first driving force is, of course, is very obvious. It's by law and regulation. I take one example here is, for example, like GDPR has been in place on 25th of May, 2018. Once the GDPR in place and everything need to comply with GDPR regulation requirement. So the internet architecture and the protocol change, and the market also changed to there are a lot of products that can fulfill GDPR legal requirement, and the law has been changed. Then the rest of the driving force, basically, they are more or less very similar in addition to the market's driving force. The first driving force, of course, is protocol or internet architecture. The internet architecture has been determined or developed or invented 50 years ago. And since then, the architecture regulated most of the cyberspace application behavior. When you go to the cyberspace, you need to comply with the protocol suite. Make sure your application behavior consistent with the protocol requirement. And although it was defined by probably engineer, but nowadays, most of the protocol needs to go through all kind of policy development process. So how we define the policy development process? We can call this as a norm. Norm is a shared expectation from the public that for appropriate behavior. So another very likely to see is a cyber norm that's officially, for example, a group of stakeholders that work together to identify a proper behavior, and they voluntary willing to commit to fulfill that requirement from the norm they develop. And once the norm developed, and they probably change the architecture and probably going to change the market as well. So that's a very simple diagram. We all working here, we follow the unique internet root system, the unique DNS root system. All the DNS has been dedicated to different registry and dedicated to second top level and dedicated to the registrant. So that's the internet operation model for DNS operation model today. But we need to, looking back, there are many stakeholders in the internet community, but we try to emphasize the importance of internet intermediary because the internet intermediary has a power of enforceability. So internet intermediary are well positioned to impose internet policy or regulation functions. But actually, there are so many characteristics in the internet intermediary. For example, like in the left-hand side, ISP or telecommunication operator, they are one kind of intermediary. Most of them follow the telecommunication regulation. They try to, basically the regulation try to protect the public interest from, for example, like a net neutrality perspective, or from universal service perspective, or equal access to the internet perspective. And on the right-hand side, for example, like a big platform provider or search engine provider, for the big platform provider, most of them come from state, and most of them regulated by Communication Decency Act, specifically Section 230. That means the platform operator, they do not liable for the content provided by third party. They are not liable for the third party content. And for in the middle, is registry operator. For example, like a .tw or .asia or even .org PIR company. And basically, we carry fiduciary duty. That means everything we do based on the best interests of our target stakeholder. That's why TWNIC, we run in the stakeholder consultation every year to make sure every decision we made fulfill stakeholder requirement and head into the stakeholder public interest. So here is one example, like a cybercrime statistic that was made in Taiwan. You can see the diagram. Majority of the cybercrime come from .com, .org, .net. where only around 4% come from .tw. So we probably have more technical tool or probably have more legal tool to taking care of the registry that register belong to your ccTLD or jurisdiction under your gTLD. But most of the case actually is outside our control. So we need to figure out how can you make a better decision and how can we expect a proper cyber behavior from the registrant that registered top level domain from this TLD. As we all know, internet is borderless, but most of the national law confined to territory limits. So they cannot exercise outside the territory. So we couldn't figure out a better way to connect these two behavior together, especially like a cyberspace, they are borderless. And we try to find a way to bridge them together. So how many solutions we have? The three will be most common solution we ever see in the today legal exercise. The first solution will be MLAT, Mutual Legal Assistance Treaties. And the problem with mutual legal assistance treaty is very slow and very complex and very complicated. The second probably we will see the solution is Budapest Convention. And again, a group of stakeholders, when they work together and come out with an international treaty that even extremely slow and extremely complicated. And probably not very scalable if you try to expand the member into a bigger or larger community. And the last one will be legal cooperation through the private connection. So of course, they still have their drawback. They probably lack of transparencies. And also when you collect evidence from outside your jurisdiction, that probably will happen with evidence and admissibility issues. And the other final last one will be conflict of law, of course. For example, like a disinformation probably was illegal in one country, but probably it is legal on the other country. So the law enforcement need to dealing with that kind of conflict of law issues. However, all that solutions are not very effective right now for today's solutions. So do we have the other way to address that kind of issue? Of course, like DNS abuse framework, they have proposed several scenarios. I try to extend the scenario to some extent. For example, like it depends on who you talk to. For example, internet intermediary could be ISP, could be CDN operator, could be hosting operator, could be platform operator, could be registry, could be registrar. And what kind of legal result you expect? Or action result, you're probably looking for more effective solution, or you're looking for quick solution, or you're looking for simple solution, or precise solution, or you're looking for proportionality requirement, especially consider one page, but a lot of legal or law for page also exists in the single domain. And you probably looking for cost-effective solution as well, because anyway, when we try to address that issue, hardly people been discussed who is going to pay for this. So we also need to look in for cost-effective issue. So according to that kind of combination, you can see when we try to address hate speech, fraud, scam, or disinformation, probably platform operator will be the ideal operator you're willing to work to. But when you talk into different cybercrime scenario, for example, like a command and control server, copyright infringement, malware or phishing, and probably registry will be a good candidate you can co-work with, because they are fulfill all kind of requirement: efficient, effective, simple, precise, proportionality. Of course, you need to go through the due diligence process. That's why you need to be very careful when you choose your notifier partner. So that's a basic DNS abuse framework under .tw, and it's more or less very similar to the Brian proposed framework. And I just try to group into different pillars. For example, we have one pillar for law, either we receive a call order, or either we get a seizure order, or either we get a government sanction. And we also have pillars called technical pillar. For example, if any cyber behavior, cyber scenario can be technical identifiable, and that belong to less technical pillar, like a malware, botnet, phishing, farming, or spam. And one of the pillar, probably we still need to have more stakeholders to work together. We call cyber node. Cyber node is part of the self-regulation. Like when we work with DotAsia, become a partnership. That's a cyber node because there's no existing law enforce us to work together. And if there are more participants want to join together, it's a cyber node because we voluntarily commit our behavior to fulfill cyber expectation. So here is the some of the message we deliver to the community. TWNIC and DotAsia collaborate together against the DNS abuse. And here is the trust notifier model and also fast track mechanism. When the complainer submit a complaint to trust notifier, and the trust notifier goes through the due diligence process, then notify the internet intermediary, and the internet intermediary can, based on their contract or registry agreement or registrar agreement, and activate fast track mechanism and follow the procedure. So the value to intermediary will be the cost reduction because the better evidence, the trust notifier collect all the required evidence from legal perspective, from technical perspective. And also it's cost reduction because transfer evaluation cost to trust notifier. And eventually that will be a company value because your domain space become much clean, and you earn the consumer trust due to you proactive, willing to looking for better behavior in the cyberspace. The value to trust notifier will be efficiency, of course, it's much faster. In addition, compared to go through mutual legal assistance treaty, it's much faster. And also effectiveness, because less enforceable, and because based on the certain cyber scenario, for example, like a phishing, would be very efficient. Okay, that will be finally, just a final word would be for cyber crime, criminal, and law enforcement. Most of the cyber criminal, they exercise the 21st century technology at a very low cost or even zero cost. But existing law enforcement and department, they actually settle with the 19th century legal framework with 20th century pretty mature IT technology. So both technology and legal framework need to be upgraded to against existing cybercrime environment. Okay, that will be end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any question after Q&A section. Thank you very much. Go back to chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kenny. And I feel like the information you've given us on what TWNIC is doing with this initiative is very insightful. And a lot of people definitely are very excited, including me, on what exactly can we expect from this collaboration. And to tell us more about this, we have Edmund Cheng from DotAsia. Edmund, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Well, I have to unmute myself first to speak. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction. As building on what Brian was saying about DNS abuse, and also what Kenny was talking about, our collaboration with TWNIC. Just want to introduce quickly about DotAsia. If you don't know, we operate the DotAsia top-level domain for the Asia Pacific internet community. And most importantly, we actually operate as a nonprofit organization. So all the .Asia domains that registered is supporting community initiatives around Asia. And we have two really main areas, and I will touch on them quickly and relate to what and why we are really working with TWNIC on it as well. One of the initiatives is a youth initiative program, which is called netmission.asia. And I'm excited to note that Pavel, our moderator, has been part of the group as well. And it's a youth engagement program in internet governance. And we talk about DNS abuse like this forum here as well, but with young persons, but that's the NetMission program. The other important program that we support is the Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum. And it started in 2010 in Hong Kong and has been in different places around Asia. And this is where I want to start the discussion about the initiative that together with TWNIC and DotAsia, we're trying to put together. The vision of DotAsia ourselves is actually to foster collaboration among the internet community in Asia, especially on addressing internet governance issues. And as Kenny mentioned, these issues with DNS abuse is something that may be very difficult to try to pull together international treaties to deal with. And therefore, by establishing these type of bilateral agreements between DotAsia and .tw, and hopefully into the future with other ccTLDs around the region, that creates a framework that allows us to take action and address DNS abuse in an expedited fashion. But before I go there, I guess taking a step back and talking about building on a little bit, or actually building backwards from what Brian was talking about, is to going back to what DNS abuse really is or is not. Recently, you may or may not have heard, and you can check it out for sure, there has been a study on the DNS abuse from the European Commission. The response in terms of how well it is I would say, a little bit mixed. And one of the reasons that is very interesting is that I think the study that the European Commission commissioned to be created took a very broad kind of a definition of DNS abuse, and that may or may not be, and in fact, in most cases, for a technical oriented top-level domain registry like TWNIC and ourselves, and also like PIR, many of the issues may not be applicable and would not be something that registries consider DNS abuse. And therefore, when Brian talked about the trusted notifier concept, and that there are notifiers and there are also, there are those that are trusted, there is a difference there, both on the operational aspect and on the both on the expertise aspect, as Brian talked about, in terms of child sexual abuse material or other issues that registries don't have an expertise on. But on the other side, operational concerns, shutting down a particular domain is a very blunt kind of a tool, because once you shut something down, let's say there's some problems on one of the pages in Alibaba, you're not going to shut down the entire Alibaba.com domain, right? I mean, but for registries, that is the only, unfortunately, that's the only option that registries and registrars have in terms of shutdown. So some of the, and therein lies the difficulty on, the mixed response from the recent study that was hotly discussed in different forums. But here, let me, I guess, talk a little bit about how I see DNS abuse and its relation to what registries and registrars could do. This is my, I guess I'll start by saying this is my personal view on how the DNS abuse ecosystem kind of works, especially for gTLDs. You really have, as a registry, you have the registry system that's connected to the registrar system, that's connected, that's through which the registrant actually registers a domain name. And it's, and then it comes out with the DNS, which is the gTLD DNS. But in the ICANN ecosystem also, there are a few other components, and they are essentially, ICANN also operates the root DNS and also inserts into the IANA root database. And this is really what, in the gTLD perspective, these are the components that we can effectively intervene, because we can talk about all the content matter and all the other things that happen, but these are the only parts that really the ICANN community can intervene. There are, of course, many other aspects, right? There are the DNS that is operated by end customers, as Kenny explained in terms of the hierarchy. Once we delegate a particular domain, it goes outside of the something that the registry can control, and then the DNS resolvers, and then the ISPs, and many other web application platforms. So within what the registry systems and what the ICANN system could actually look at is very limited. There are only these particular components that we can, actually intervene and put policies around to start with. Whether we should put policies is a different question altogether. But, just looking at the ecosystem, and then you have the DNS infrastructure, further infrastructure of the internet, and also content. That this is far removed from what the registries and registrars actually can deal with. And then, of course, ccTLDs is a very different aspect, and TWNIC gives a very different aspect, because their registry and registrars are outside of the ICANN direct remit. They're actually operating within their local jurisdiction rather than directly under ICANN policies. And abuses can happen on each and every single of these areas, not necessarily just the part where there is an ICANN remit to look into. And so, as you can see here, only a very small slice, in fact, could actually ICANN and the ICANN community actually work on. So, instead of, and a way of really grappling this, in my mind, is something like this. So we have a larger, a lot of, cyber abuses, a lot of different abuses that people talk about, and it's apocalyptic in some sense. A lot of people talk about there are all these problems, but DNS abuse is only one part of it, and in fact, not a very big part of it. If you look at some of the reports, like for example from ICANN, the DAR report, the domain abuse report that ICANN produces, it's only 0.1 or 2% that we're talking about in terms of all the domain names registered that actually fall under DNS abuse. And here is something that also I wanted to highlight, is that here for in the smaller circle in it is where top level domain registries are, it is appropriate for TLD registries to act on in terms of abuses that we can, act on. As I mentioned, sometimes it is simply not appropriate to shut down the entire domain just because one of the pages or one of the links have a problem. And shutting down the domain needs special consideration. But here you can see that there are also, things that are not DNS abuse that DoD registries would take care of. For example, rights protection, like the Uniform Dispute Resolution Program, like what Brian mentioned in terms of CSAM, the child sexual abuse materials. These are abuses, but they are not necessarily DNS abuses. They are still DNS. There are still abuses that top-level domain registries can and probably should put policies around, but those are not DNS abuses. But then there are also, of course, there are those that are DNS abuses that registries could mitigate against, which includes phishing, malware, and some of the things that Brian mentioned as well. And one list, or I guess a relatively well consensus that established well consensus is these 5: phishing, malware, botnets, farming, and spam as a vector of distributing phishing, malware, and so on. And this is really the extent of what registries and registrars can act on and can consistently respond to. But But of course, these these abuses evolve over time. Another dimension that was discussed and also quite well established now, I think, is that there are different types of situations. It is possible that a domain registered was registered specifically to to engage in malicious activities, and we call that malicious registrations. This is a kind of DNS abuse that we need to think about. But there are also situations where there are compromised registrations. That means someone registered a domain, they're running their business, but part of the domain or part of their website has been compromised, and some of the phishing or malware or botnets or whatever is happening through that domain. So those are compromised registrations, and they're two very different issues. In terms of malicious registrations, one of the things that and that builds into the work that TWNIC and DotAsia is starting here, is that malicious registrations are something that potentially registries or registrars can detect, hopefully, or at least keep an eye on for things like what is now called registrar hopping, or especially TLD hopping, which means registrar hopping means a malicious registrant or a domain gets registered from one registrar, it gets shut down, it goes to another registrar, it goes to another registrar, so that to evade being shut down. TLD hopping also happens. So when a malicious registration happens on one TLD, the TLD try to shut it down, it jumps to another TLD and gets registered the same thing, and then it jumps to another TLD and so on. And these are types of malicious registrations that with some information sharing between registries and registrars, there is a potential to address, maybe not proactive. I mean, we be proactive, maybe not like pre-crime, but at least when a profile of certain registrant or certain domain names that we registered, we can put a watch list on certain domains to address them, and that's really the crux of the relationship. Right now, the idea that Kenny brought up, and I guess from TWNIC and DotAsia quickly jumped on as making a lot of sense, is because that as I mentioned, the registry has a certain level of sensitivity. We won't easily shut down a domain name because if it's just a part of the domain, then maybe it's not the right thing to do. But sometimes cybersecurity experts, are more gung-ho on, shutting down sites. So the trusted notifier process between TWNIC and DotAsia makes sense in our view because of that. Because the reason why we can trust each other as registries is because we also understand the sensitivity. Yes, we want to do the right thing to shut down the bad guys, want to shut out DNS abuse, but at the same time, there's a sensitivity level that registries must take in order to do the right thing, whether to keep the site up or to take it down. And that's what that builds on the that's what the trust can be built on between registries. And I think that's the reason why we have started the program. It's fairly simple to think of. DotAsia and .tw actually recognizes each other as trusted notifier, and we established a secure channel to let each other know if there are problems with a particular .asia domain. TWNIC can tell us if we come across a problematic .tw domain, that we can tell TWNIC, and they can go through an expedited process to take down the name. So that's really, what it is. And .asia ourselves, we are actually formed by the country code top-level domains around the region. And these are some of our members and some of our potential members. And we are, once we have this pilot in place, we are actually hoping to look to work with our other members to establish this type of bilateral agreements as well. And the last thing I want to touch on here is that we will start off with these bilaterals because what we have also found is that each registry has their own processes to evaluate the DNS abuse, and it might be a little bit different. So being a hub is probably not necessarily the most effective way. And the way that we've set it up with the .tw is really a bilateral agreement, and the similar bilateral agreement, but could have different nuances, could be established with other top-level domains in the region. And that's what we hope to do. And that's really the longer vision for the work that we're doing together with TW. With that, thank you. Sorry for taking a little bit more time than allocated, but back to you, Pavel.
No worries, Edmund. Actually, that answered a lot of my questions because I was just thinking, while you were talking, I was thinking of what I should be asking, but you did answer a lot of my questions. But with that said, we are done with the first half of this session, and the second half, where we still do have a bit of time, and I think we can stretch it just a little bit to have some questions and answers. So to all the audience who are here now, if you would like to ask any questions, please put it in the Q&A. And while we wait for that, I think there was one question, and I think this was for Brian, on whether PIR publishes statistics on the number of domain takedown requests from law enforcement agencies. So I know, Brian, that you answered it, but would you like to say something else, some more details on it?
Sure. So yes, we do. We publish, and I posted in the Q&A pod. We post transparency reporting for all of our takedowns for DNS abuse. And as Edmund, I think, did a great job articulating the difference between DNS abuse versus website content abuse. And if you look at the numbers of domains that we suspended last year, for example, I think it was a few thousand domains that we actually acted upon to suspend for DNS abuse, things like phishing, farming, malware, botnets. And then for website content abuse, that number was, I think, 20, something like that, right in that ballpark. So to give you the scale of what we think is appropriate at the registry level to take action on the content level, really, we're talking about it's the CSAM, it's the worst of the worst, is only when it crosses that threshold for us to take action on content. But yeah, we do publish all of our transparency reporting for DNS abuse and website content abuse stuff.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you for sharing the link as well for everyone who is definitely interested. Please go and check it out. And now I have a few questions for Edmund and Kenny, and Brian, please chip in as well whenever you would like. So with .asia being a gTLD and .tw being a ccTLD, as we know, was how did the initiative start for this collaboration to tackle DNS abuse? I just wanted to know the brainchild of this. If you can just get us through this, like how did this happen? I think we'd all like to know about it. Yeah, please go ahead.
I guess I can start, and I'll let you start.
Sure.
So DotAsia has been working with our members in the last couple of years. In fact, one of the initiatives that DotAsia have been starting since last year is to explore collaboration with our members. .tw and TWNIC being one of our members, we have been starting to discuss different work that we have been working on over the last year. And in the last meeting with TWNIC, we finally found an area for closer collaboration, and especially when we were talking about the hot topics around the industry, which is DNS abuse being one of them. Kenny mentioned some of the statistics that he mentioned as in terms of being able to address DNS abuse as a registry in Taiwan. And I think that's where the brainchild came from, and that's where Kenny comes in. So he is really the brainchild behind the idea. So I'll let Kenny talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, right. Thank you, Edmund. And basically, I believe all the registry operators, they have experienced more or less very similar situation, because when they experience the cybercrime or cyber abuse, And basically, we need to find a way to solve the issue. Probably not by ourselves. Probably it's more appropriate by law enforcement agent. But unfortunately, a lot of cybercrime is related to the domain name. It's not so many, but still some. But when we experience that kind of situation, and we don't have proper tool to handle that, as I mentioned, the existing tool either goes through MLAT or goes through Budapest Convention or goes through legal cooperation, but all that kind of solution is not very effective. Not to mention, not all the countries have been signed MLAT with each other. So as I discussed with Edmund, probably we need to identify some neutral way, and because of the same registry, we share the same level of sensibility as Edmund mentioned, because we are very pay attention to our registrant, and especially we don't easily take down any domain without any due diligence process. So, and with this regard, if any cybersecurity company, they ask us to take down the domain, we are actually create a lot of issue because they don't have any kind of sensibility regarding to proportionality consideration, proportionality principle. They don't have that kind of concept. So working with the registry, that makes sense because we share the same level of sensibility. We have similar experience, and we also address a similar issue. Although the coverage between two TLD is not fun, certainly is not good enough, but we hope that will be a kickoff start, and hopefully most of the registry or registrar or the other potential partner willing to join the group and find probably will be a more innovation way to against the DNS abuse in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing is I mentioned it already, but I'll emphasize it's really TLD hopping. And we're really seeing that happen these days, that bad sites pop up in different top level domains. And you know, it's what, with a little bit of information sharing that I think can help a lot. And the network with registries becomes valuable, I think. I don't know whether Brian might want to add to that actually too.
No, yeah, I completely agree. And honestly, too, Kenny and Edmund, to the extent you see something hop from either TW or Asia to or, please do let us know, because we're certainly aware it's a problem. And there's nothing, to Edmund's point, there's nothing that we as an individual registry can quote do other than when it pops in our own TLD. This is actually something that we've been having discussions where aware specifically when it comes to CSAM that this is increasingly becoming a problem. Child sexual abuse material, well, there'll be some known strings that go from one TLD to another. And so increased communication and information sharing, totally agreed with Edmund, is pretty important. I would say too that that's a good intro to that. So the DNS Abuse Institute, which I know Graham Bunton will tomorrow be a presenter, hopes to serve in that sort of collaborative way where there's a potential there for information sharing between registrars as well as registries across TLDs.
Thank you, Brian and Edmund and Kenny. Thank you very much. And we actually do have a few questions that I'd like to address first before I ask a few more questions. So I hope we go a bit over time. I wouldn't take too much of your time though, because this is just getting interesting. So we have a question from Yo on due diligence process taken by a ccTLD like .tw on the legitimate request from a legitimate law enforcement agency. So how long does that process take? Kenny, if you could just shed light on this.
Okay, I don't have that kind of, to be honest, I don't have existing statistics regarding to the how long it takes from law enforcement agent, because basically in Taiwan, all the prosecution, all the investigation is almost invisible from outside. So I don't have precise data regarding to how long they take. From .tw, we do have our due process regarding to, as I mentioned, technical identifiable major, like a phishing, like a botnet. Identify whether, sorry, running out of power. Hold on.
It's all good.
Okay, so we do have some technical tool to identify whether it's fulfill the technical category, either it's a botnet or malware or phishing. And we do have that kind of technical measure. And we also exchange that kind of process, technical operational process with DotAsia, make sure all the process and they can understood and they can realize that will be technical make sense to them. And also, they will share us their procedure as well. So with that kind of notification process, and basically that can speed up the whole process much, much faster. Even no matter what kind of outcome it was going to be, at least the registry willing to take the first step and activate that kind of investigation and take whatever action from legal perspective they are happy to take. And for example, like at TW, we have a registry agreement. We can base on the registry or registrant agreement and to ask them to need to comply with like the contract requirement. That's what we can do. Of course, I can probably have something quite similar, but probably I can still need to work in on how to ensure the contract can be made based on the ICANN expectation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. And we have just one more question from Fikri Amir Jafar, who says that, do you think with the help of big data, by visualizing more data about DNS abuse, can it help overcome DNS abuse? So they're asking, with the help of big data, can we overcome DNS abuse? Does anyone want to take that question?
I guess I'm happy to share, not necessarily big data, just some data is probably useful. So, but I can I still share screen? Oh, here you go. This is a report that's from ICANN, and I can put the link in the chat as well. And it shows you a little bit about how the last 4 years happened in terms of DNS abuse. And just going through, let's see. You know, this is the number of domains in the zone, and this is the number of domains with security threat. But here you can see an interesting thing. You know, it goes up and down, and also there are peaks, right? And you can probably trace back on some of the peaks. I think you know, this was probably when I forgot what happened. There was some incident, some DGA that happened. There was some, you know, but one interesting observation here is that it's generally going down. I'm not saying that it's definitely, you know, DNS abuse is no longer an issue, but as registries do respond, I think they, you know, you can see that the trend. Of course, it might just very much well go back up again, but also, you know, I think the answer to the question is that these type of data is quite important, and it shows you here the legacy top-level domains and the new generic top-level domains, and really, you know, the abuse is a little bit, you know, similar in terms of the total number of abuse domains that were found. But of course, the new gTLDs, it's spread across many top-level domains, and whereas the legacy TLDs, you know, focus a little bit more on a few top-level domains. But these are some of the data that has been out there. Then, you know, this looks at what type of abuse are most common, and you can see that phishing, you know, malware, and then spam occupies a big chunk of it. And then, you know, command and control botnets and so on. So I guess, you know, my quick response is that, yes, I think data is important. Big data might be useful in terms of trying to predict where and when DNS abuse might come in, and especially on the domain generation kind of algorithm types of things, perhaps to mitigate against. But I think general data itself is quite useful for this type of topic.
Thank you, Edmund. And we have one more question in the chat. It's in the Q&A from Amina, who is an APIGA youth leader. I don't know if you remember. But she, of course, if you know her, you know she is obsessed with blockchain. So she has a question about the uprising trend of blockchain organizations, and, for example, decentralized autonomous organizations. And she wants to know if there has been any discussion or methods to fight any sort of abuse which occur in such organizations.
Brian or Eamon, I don't have I don't have this idea.
Brian, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, but honestly, it's not something that's come across my desk yet. So I'll be on the lookout for it, but no, I don't, unfortunately, I don't have any real insight here.
No worries. To wrap it up, though, I have one question of my own, because we are, with due respect to the time, and I know everyone wants to go home. So, or they are at home, but everyone just wants to get off the screen. Just one last question, and this is feel free to answer, because for anyone in the panel. So we are grateful that TWNIC and DotAsia has taken this initiative. But how can we improve a faster process for the DNS abuse under the existing registry or registrar model without, having to have this bilateral agreement between two organizations? Because as you know, this is still a fresh initiative, and I guess we'll still take some time and see your results, which you're definitely looking forward to. But what can the existing registrars do to tackle this problem, if you may?
Okay, I probably can go first. Basically, we are lucky to working with DotAsia, because we not only have a partnership with DotAsia, also we exchange the technical operation principle with DotAsia, and DotAsia also shares their technical due process procedure. Unfortunately, that kind of procedure is very, very much similar, because from technical perspective, how can you identify the technical threat? Basically, the due process will be very similar. And we are happy to share that kind of due process with the DotAsia or any further trust notifier. And we share that kind of process, we are more comfortable when the complaint was come from the trust notifier. We have confidence because they do all the required due diligence process, and they have collect required evidence already. So we are more reluctant to officially take that kind of complaint and take it into a required action. That's from my perspective.
Thank you, Kenny. And Edmund, please.
Yeah, I guess I can add, yeah, I think, of course, always, especially these issues of phishing, malware, and stuff, time is of the essence, because the phishing site only comes up with, the first few hours are critical. However, that's where also the limitations from some of the registry and registrar that I was trying to explain comes into play as well. It's a very blunt tool, again, that we, once we take down something, it's the entire domain goes away, and therefore the due diligence part is important. So the ideas for putting together this type of collaboration is already expediting the process, because especially as I mentioned about TLD hopping, this will definitely expedite the ability for us to shut down abuse sites. But the proportionality is still important, and therefore I think there are, as you remember my little graph, there are many other DNS abuse sites that the registry is not able to take on, and that requires awareness to work with ISPs, to work with hosting providers, to work with other parts of the infrastructure to try to address these issues. So the collaboration is already making it faster. I think what Brian mentioned in terms of the DNS Abuse Institute is also, is another level that DotAsia is definitely looking to participate in to speed it up. But again, there are some road, speed bumps that we think are necessary and the right thing to do for registries.
Thank you, Edmund. And Brian, if you'd like to say the last few words.
Sure. The only other thing I would add, it's sort of a different but complementary approach that we implement as well is on incentivization for registrars. So we try and create an environment where there's less abuse on the front end, and we do that by providing financial incentives to registrars with low abuse levels. And we've actually seen two things. One, abuse has gone down across our TLD over the course we've implemented this program, and our renewal rates have gone up. And more to the point, the registrars that implement this program, called the Quality Performance Index, or QPI, their renewal rates have gone up around 4%, which is really pretty big. So it's both good for business and good for lowering abuse. So I just put a link in. It's www.qpi.org if you want to hear more about it. We sort of open sourced it, for lack of a better word. So any other registry that wants to implement something like this, we're happy to help facilitate and talk about that.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Edmund, and thank you, Kenny, so much for your time and for giving us such an insightful session on on the cooperation between TWNIC and DotAsia. And I believe the cooperation between them will definitely further highlight the importance of cross top-level domain cooperation. And I look forward to the expedited processing mechanism of this trusted notifier. And I believe which will actively be a step towards the global domain name industry. And with that, I would like to say thank you to all our audience as well for sticking with us for a couple of extra minutes. And before the session ends, I'll hand it over to Amr. Amr, thank you very much.
Thank you, Papa, and the speaker, Brian, Kenny, and Evan, for the very insightful discussion. Before we go, kindly fill up the survey that will pop up in front of your screens. As for further feedback, kindly fill out the form that has been provided on the chat box, and don't forget about the Amazon gift card for US 50 each that could be yours. For more details, you may visit APAC.DNSforum.my.
I would also like to thank our guest speakers as well as the moderators for your time. Last but not least, I would like to thank everyone who took the effort to join our gamification for your participation and support. You are welcome to tune in for tomorrow's session. We will start the forum with the topic DNS directions and network operators at 9 UTC plus 8 and UTC. For more information about the topics that will be discussed, as well as any information on the speakers for the forum, you may head to apacdnsforum.my. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.